Yes, good evening, members of council. It's always an honor and a privilege to be here to present the budget requests on behalf of the Department of Public Works for 2021. This will be the start of a slideshow for presentation 1 of 7. So we'll go ahead and get started. The Public Works Administrative Division is the central office for all things public works. Our staff is committed to supporting all of the divisions of Public Works and delivering the essential services we're tasked with delivering on a daily basis. The mantra with Public Works staff is simple yet direct. We're going to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. We're going to operate in an environment of respect, and we're going to do our best to provide the highest levels of customer service to Bloomington's residents and visitors. We're a small but mighty group. Our focus continues to be to implement projects and programs that utilize technology, data, and metrics to inform our decision making, while also assisting with project management of the important infrastructure investments made in coordination with many other city departments. So far in 2020, we have initiated the second phase of the Sidewalk Repair Assistance Program to lower and moderate income neighborhoods within the federally designated community development block grant areas. One of the projects that's been a great success so far this year has been the Kirkwood Enhancements that began this past spring. General pavement maintenance was performed 9 weeks ahead of schedule from Walnut Street to the sample gates, which included the installation of 22 reinforced stamped concrete crosswalks, 44 ADA compliant curb ramps, and 100 vehicle resistant bollards. And then after much coordination and the replacement of a 100-year-old water main, we have released the alley activation project out to bid for the Bicentennial alley activation project for the block on the north side of the square. Moving towards more efficient LED lighting for both city and Duke-owned street lights has long been a goal for our team. We're beginning to make headway on that plan to convert the over 2,000 street lights citywide with these upgrades. We're currently finalizing a lifetime cost analysis and are actively researching all potential funding options. As the chief administrative body of the city of Bloomington, the Board of Public Works meets bi-weekly and is tasked with approving all uses of the public rights of way, special events, as well as city expenditures outside of parks, police and fire and utilities. Staffing and coordinating their work is an everyday task. I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Kyla Cox-Decker, the Board of Public Works President, Beth Hollingsworth and Dana Palazzo for their dedication to the board, their attention to detail, which is a mighty fine attention to detail, and their focused efforts to make sure that all items that come before the board are given fair and equal treatment. In line with our efforts to better utilize technology and software platforms for better data management, we've been doing our best to move forward with both our Lucy asset management upgrades and implementing a new and improved sanitation software platform called Routeware. For me personally, this has been one of the most disappointing disruptions to our operations based on COVID-19. Both projects were off to really successful starts in the early months of the year, only to face implementation setbacks due to travel restrictions placed on employees of the two companies. We've certainly made progress and we've readjusted some timelines, so I'm very much confident that these projects will be a successful part of our overall modernization efforts. Another setback due to COVID-19 is that all in-person conferences and educational sessions have obviously been canceled for the vast majority of 2020. Therefore, staff's been taking advantage of online education and professional development resources through the American Public Works Association, the International City County Management Association, and other municipal government organizations. The department is also on track to submit an annual U-Report case activities report to the Board of Public Works by December 15th. Continuing with some of our 2021 budget goals, we're hoping to continue with an additional phase of the Sidewalk Repair Assistance Program, hopefully complete a second phase of the alley activation project, and again, continue to try to implement more efficient LED lighting throughout the network. Additionally, again, 2021 we'll have the bi-weekly meetings of the Board of Public Works, which require quite a bit of staffing effort. So thanks to Melissa Herzl and April Rosenbarger, Christina Smith, Michael Large, and Nate Nickel on all their work to be successful with the Board of Public Works. As some of you may recall, 2017 was the first year where we had a high-tech field reconnaissance data project that provided condition indexing for all of our pavement and sidewalk sections, as well as all of our street signs. This data has been invaluable in guiding decision-making on where infrastructure investments are made. In adherence with the best management practices for these types of projects, the data should be updated every 3 years. So you'll be seeing a budget request through the street department coming later on that, but it's a project that has very close coordination with the administrative office and the street department. As has been the case in previous years, we're going to strive to offer the highest levels of customer service to the residents and visitors, while also providing staff with meaningful professional development opportunities. For the sake of the entire world, I hope 2021 allows for some of this to take place in person. With all of the impacts of COVID-19, this slide represents the single most significant budgetary impact to the Department of Public Works. While parking revenues are obviously down locally, the statewide decline in gas taxes that fund the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund that are then distributed to local municipalities like ours has been hit very hard. The interdepartmental transfer highlighted here of $1 million is to offset those motor vehicle highway reductions with general fund dollars, so the street department can hopefully continue to meet goals in 2021. When we get to the street department budget request in a while here, I'll be sure to provide some more detail on those revenue impacts. Outside of the interdepartmental transfer that was just highlighted, our overall budget request for the division is pretty well in line with our 2020 request. The administration division's general fund budget request is $2.916 million, with an increase of just under $1 million due to that interfund transfer. Our 2021 budget request doesn't also include a recover forward request, similar to what was recently approved and appropriated by the council. Staff looks forward to coordinating and implementing these important infrastructure investments in our bicycle and pedestrian transportation network. This slide just shows the additions in the 300 category for recover forward funds. And again, I thank the council for hearing the request this evening. It's always an honor and privilege to serve the city of Bloomington. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. And are there any council questions here for the first part of Mr. Wason's presentation? And I can see very few pictures at the moment. Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you, Mr. Wason. So this nearly $1 million in differential between funding and expenditures is occurred in less than 6 months. Is it still occurring at the same rate? In other words, 6 months hence, or do you anticipate another appropriation of some kind, or?
I'll ask the Controller Underwood jump in and help wherever I fail here, but what we're seeing is certainly reductions in the current year motor vehicle highway funding allocations to the city of Bloomington. That's been those are allocated, I believe, every 2 months, and so saw some initial reductions of almost 40% for specific months. So the request for 2021 is the anticipated shortfall that we would expect to see if the trends continue. And
I see.
Yeah. So if Mr. Underwood wants,
it's a projection.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah, the state sends us on a lot of the miscellaneous revenues projections to utilize. And obviously, as I noted on the first night, gasoline tax for the street department are down significantly. So we've used the state's estimate on that. As Adam pointed out, and you'll see in the street department, there's actually about a $2 million reduction in the overall budget because they had to cut out from their budget request. So this was kind of a middle of the road approach to keep the department fully staffed and fully funded as much as we could. We cut out a lot of the capital dollars and some of the other things as well, but we think it'll be sufficient. We're hoping to see a rebound, obviously, in 21. If we get additional revenues, then we would come back and ask to appropriate those for projects.
well, just for clarity, so you're expecting a rebound in 2021, but you're projecting forward to say that
we're hoping that it rebounds, but we're using the state's projection. So this is a lean budget based on what the state's telling us.
And the state is, what's the state telling us that we're going to have?
I think it was a 22% reduction in what they expected for 19. So
I guess what I'm getting to is the state basing that projection on that we would be operating under similar circumstances to what we are operating under today for the duration of 12 months.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. And Mr. Wason, again, thank you for that presentation. My question has to do with some of the funds for Recover Forward of the 400,000, or actually 450,000. But I know there's many aggressive projects and some of the things we think we can accomplish. And I'll talk to you later about how we prioritize or plan to prioritize some of those projects. But my more specific question has to do with sidewalks that are damaged by street trees.
Favorite topic.
Yeah. And I guess my question is, any funds that we would use for that with regard to the property owner, is this a match funding situation, or have we?
So I can jump in here. When it comes to sidewalks damaged by street trees that are under the ownership of the city of Bloomington and the maintenance responsibility of the city of Bloomington, it's the toughest gray area we deal with when it comes to sidewalk maintenance throughout the city. The approach we've taken in Public Works over the last several years is we try to, the dollars that we make 100% investments into sidewalk repairs, we try to focus on street tree damage or accessibility improvements. So absolutely, of the 2020 Recover Forward funds that you folks approved last week, we are excited to say that we're planning to spend at least $50,000 to $100,000 specifically on sidewalk repairs due to street tree damage. We're still working out some of the full prioritization and locations, things like that we'll come back and present to the council, but absolutely. So we plan to make those investments, and we currently make those investments with the dollars that we do allocate towards sidewalk improvements funded wholly by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. I moved. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Wason. Lots of exciting things we heard updates on. I just wanted to clarify, as I had with another budget or two, that this the Recover Forward expenditures, that's separate from what we approved already. This is 2021 anticipated, which will come in a separate appropriation at another time. But it's kind of a similar block of money as we saw in the 2020 package we just passed. Is that right?
Absolutely. So of the 450 being requested for 2021, 400,000 again would be allocated directly towards mobility enhancements for the bike and pedestrian network. For the 2021 request, instead of 250,000 for the Bloomington transit stops, we're requesting 50,000 go towards that. in coordination with Mr. Copper and others, we think that the 250 allocated this year will cover a lot of the improvements identified in their study already, and that 50 will be a great supplement for next year.
Great. And have you, you mentioned a few folks working on different pieces of this. Have you all coordinated with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Commission at all? Is that something you would consider?
For the sidewalk improvements and such?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're trying to do right now with the 2020 dollars that have been appropriated is come up with the highest priority areas based on our condition index data, and then plan to bring it forward to the Transportation Committee and others to say, hey, here's what we're thinking. Can you provide some feedback? I can tell you some of the areas we're looking at very closely right now for full block replacements of sidewalks are around the Banneker Community Center in that neighborhood. We're looking at one up on West 14th Street, just west of, I think it's Kinzer Pike there. Rogers turns into Kinzer, but west of that area on West 14th, there's an old WPA sidewalk. We'd like to do something, some repairs to there. And then, like I said, we're looking at some smaller projects to do street tree damage. We're actually going to look to do $50,000 probably towards a, Joe just told me it's 13th Street, not 14th. We're also looking to do a project specific to sidewalk grinding. So this is where you get heavy duty grinders out there and take care of sidewalk heaves that aren't too significant yet. So we're going to take a variety of approaches and hopefully make some great improvements.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Rollo?
Thank you. Mr. Wason, I want to ask a question about a constituent contacted me a few days ago, and it was about line digging for AT&T for fiber optic, I guess. And it was, they were digging, they were requested to dig, or they were intending to dig outside of the easement, and they insisted that they needed to do so. And is this a very common thing that you've encountered? You may know about the case. I don't know. But,
is this specific to the damage to the yard and trying to get it repaired by the company? Yeah. You know, what I can tell you, council member, is that when it comes to the private utilities working within utility easements, you know, the city has very little oversight of that. And we actually don't even have permitting abilities for that type of work. And this is the unfortunate answer often in these situations with private utilities that then damage private property, is it becomes a civil matter between the two private entities. The city simply doesn't have jurisdiction in those cases of the private property and the private entities. But what we do is when we find out about things, we make those sorts of things, we make direct contacts to the highest levels of the utilities that we can to say, hey, we've got a constituent dealing with this issue and it was the result of work by your utility. Can you please work with them? I'll tell you, we have pretty good success with that. And I know that I believe I'm certain that's the exact approach we're taking right now, trying to get the utility to understand the additional damage that occurred outside of the easement.
is it a commonplace?
You know, it's not been as common recently. I can tell you a few years back when there was a lot more fiber installation going on, especially in like the Southeast corridor and things, we were getting a lot of calls and trying to, coordinate those types of repairs. But this was probably the first one of the year that came to my attention, at least.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other council questions? All right, and I'll not bother with the second round if I'm not seeing any hands up. So we will now go to the public. If anyone wants to make a comment on this initial presentation for Public Works, do we have any hands raised or messages in our chat?
Yes, it looks like we have a message from Mr. Alex, or Mr. Alexander would like to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute him.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Greg Alexander again. I just want to bring to your attention that Public Works does, just like Mr. Wason said, they do sidewalk maintenance under certain circumstances. And I live on North Madison Street, and the sidewalk just north of me on the west side of the street has a severe problem that's been noted in U reports for a number of years. There's no need for a pavement condition index. It's been reported by citizens just again and again and again. Not just me, by the way, and not just my wife. And it took several years for anything to be done. And then last year they started sending, I'm just gonna say mean letters to the people that live on the street. And really that should be just Public Works responsibility to maintain the sidewalk, period. But so there were 2 lots where the sidewalk was just, it's ridiculous. There's, it's crumbled through all the way to the mud underneath. And so one of those 2 was replaced this year. I assume they used the neighborhood where they got a 50% match from Public Works. And the other one was not, because it's a rental, they're not eligible for that. I could be wrong on the details there. But so they shut down the sidewalk for almost a quarter mile for just replacing this one little piece of it. And then another piece where they got a neighbor that bit on the 50% offer, even though their sidewalk wasn't really that bad. And then they replaced the curb along that full stretch. And they replaced the curb on the other side of the street. Well, they're still doing it right now along that full stretch of 2.5 blocks. And that's how it works. That the street, they prioritize it. They do the whole segment, but then the sidewalk, they just do one property line at a time, one tiny little segment at a time. And the result is that we're having a lot more sidewalk closure than we have to, and yet we're not actually getting a high quality sidewalk. And really, this is something Public Works could do if you funded it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Do we have more in the public comment? Seeing none, no messages in chat.
No, I don't see any more, and I don't see any messages in chat.
Thank you. Let us go back to council then for any final comment, or if you have any residual questions. Not seeing any hands. Councilmember Rollo. You are, yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to, can you hear me? I wanted to give credit to Mr. Wason for his work on COVID. When the city was processing what to do, obviously Public Works was tremendously affected by the outbreak, and Mr. Wason worked very diligently at protecting his employees and also making sure that the facilities at City Hall were sterile, clean, and uncontaminated for the public. And I just want to give him credit for working very diligently on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final comments? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Wason, for the presentation. I'm excited to hear more from your department. I just wanted to give a shout out for a lot of the great things you're doing that I'm excited about, including looking at LED lights for all the street lights. And I'd be excited to follow up more about email and hear what that study is going like, and just from a funding standpoint, what kind of funding streams we're talking about and what opportunities are there. I also like the pavement conditions index and the work that your team has undertaken to kind of systematize our approach to these things. I think it's really important to have a systematic way to deal with these things. And the alley activation work, as well as the Kirkwood projects of this last year, have been really great and super timely as well. Obviously, all the businesses on the street are benefiting immensely from the ease with which we can open up the street for other uses. Also, I just wanted to clarify my comments earlier in talking about what I see as like sometimes a fundamental tension between customer service and a goal-oriented planning approach is, of course, not a binary and not meant to be a criticism. There's a lot of advantages to customer service and making sure that our residents are happy and well attended to. So like, I'm afraid it may have come off as more critical than I meant. So I just wanted to clarify that I know your team thinks about the long range as well, just like planning and transportation thinks about customer service. So just wanted to say that. And I'm happy to, well, I guess we're gonna hear all the divisions before we vote on anything. So thank you again, or maybe not, maybe we vote now.
Thank you. Other questions? And procedurally, I may need some guidance here from our Council Attorney, do we vote after each and every one of these that Adam will be presenting?
Yes,
what I
that's
thought.
correct. So Adam will go through each of the divisions and we'll have a separate vote on each one.
Thank you. Council comment before we move to that vote? All right, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Rosenbarger, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Is that just me or is that?
I can't hear her.
Okay, I'm gonna skip over you, Councilmember Rosenbarger, for just a second, get Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Okay, and Councilmember Rosenbarger? I still can't hear, I'm so sorry.
Can she make a motion that we could interpret?
Can't read her lips.
Nod your head.
I would counter the same way we counted Councilmember Rallo earlier.
Technical difficulty.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger, I'm gonna go ahead and mark you down with technical difficulties. If that's okay with you, you can just give me a big nod. Thank you.
All right, and that stands 8-0-0 with technical difficulties. Moving on now to animal control. I believe that's next.
Excuse me. Did the screen share show up there?
Yes.
Perfect. Great. So number 2 of 7, again, Adam Wason, Public Works, here to present the 2021 budget request for the Animal Care and Control Division. Tasked with providing animal care and control services to the community, this division of Public Works is home to a passionate and skilled workforce that has animal welfare as its #1 goal. The just over 18 full-time equivalents include our animal control officers, shelter staff, and our volunteer coordination team. Although the mission doesn't change year to year, the shelter leadership team and staff are always striving to be a model example in the animal welfare field. While all divisions of Public Works have faced challenges related to COVID-19, the animal shelter may have some of the most dramatic impacts to their actual operations compared to some of our other divisions. Closing the shelter to daily visitors was a hard but necessary decision to make. And all visits to the shelter had to be done by appointment. This hasn't impacted our overall success indicators for the shelter, but it certainly has required major modifications to how we staff the facility and operate to meet our goals. Having the lowest possible euthanasia rates are always a top priority. The current mid-year euthanasia rate is at 3%, which is really phenomenal. Last year's mid-year percentage rate was 6%. The live release rate is the calculation of animals that leave the shelter's care via adoption, return to owner, or transfer to another rescue group or shelter. Our mid-year live release rate percentage is at 86%, while last year mid-year we were at 75%. Our current mid-year average length of stay for animals in our care is at 22 days, just slightly above our set goal. I will say that the length of stay has definitely been impacted a bit by COVID. So another huge part of COVID impacts is that we had to severely limit our volunteer activity. We do have a few volunteers that have returned since the beginning of July, but this goal for 2020 is just simply not possible based on the limited access to the facility. As with all, I'll probably say this about 7 times tonight, but COVID has impacted all of our scheduled training and certification conferences that were planned. Staff has been able to take part in online educational opportunities through the United States Humane Association and as well as other organizations. and spent a lot of time just a few weeks back as a team doing trainings together. In terms of our ACO our animal control officer callouts, we strive very much to close out 75% of those the day that we receive them, and currently mid-year we're at 77%, so just slightly above our goal. Overall, one major theme has been prevalent over the last several years. Surrenders to the shelter have seen an increasing number of animals with behavioral and health issues. This increases the amount of care and rehabilitation required, but staff takes these challenges on with dedication and compassion. For 2021 budget goals, I'll just state that we're going to try to keep this goal of 11,500 volunteer hours, but without a crystal ball, I'd be lying if I said I think it's attainable at this point. Again, we're hopeful that 2020 has brighter horizons for public engagement and outreach so that we can get back out into the community doing what we do best. The picture here is our mobile adoption unit that is brand new, that would love to be out in the community on a regular basis, which was funded with, I think, 2019 dollars. But we're just kind of having to hold back on that right now. And just to personalize this a bit, animal control officers provide an essential service to the community when it comes to animal welfare investigations, responding to service calls, removing bats from homes, kitty cats from gutters, raccoons from dumpsters, dogs from storm pipes, and the thousands of deer calls per year that we receive. Nadine, Jim, and Nick are dedicated professionals that help folks at all hours of the day, 24/7, 365. Just some budget highlights. The decrease you see here in this category 4 is simply due to some major renovations to the adoption center that were made this year. And so we won't be needing those funds in 2021. And I'd just be remiss to say we're just tremendously grateful for the council support in the physical investments to have a top-notch facility for the animals in our care, and for the staff that inhabits the building every day of the year. Just some highlights from our restricted donations funding. We're staying consistent with previous year's requests, where we focus expenditures on expensive medical procedures, staff training, and behavioral training for some of our most difficult animals. When reducing the previous capital expenditures, our overall 2020 request is a 9% reduction from 2020. And that is a total request of $1.74 million, which is a decrease of $163,000. Again, just about 9%. As I rehearsed all these presentations over the last few days, it was pointed out that I use the word proud a lot when talking about the work we do in public works. I'm not going to be ashamed of that redundancy, because I'm truly proud of the efforts of all the staff and volunteers that make the City of Bloomington's Animal Care and Control Division a model for other shelters. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I say I'm happy to answer them, but I'll probably rely on Virgil a whole lot here.
Thank you, Mr. Wason. And I see Councilmember Rollo's hand up.
Thank you. Euthanasia rates, have they gone up, down?
They're down currently for the year. Last year, mid-year, we were at 6%. This year, mid-year, we're at 3%. That can fluctuate a bit depending on the demeanor and types of animals that come in our care. But I mentioned earlier, we've seen an increase in just more difficult animals. But our behavior team does tremendous work.
Well, I have time. You mentioned thousands of deer calls, and that's unlikely to change, I think. I'd like to put a plug in for a wildlife management team that would oversee this problem. What do you think about that, Mr. Wason? At least we could be counting them by drone, keeping track of population changes and things like that.
Councilmember Rallo, I would be out of my league if I tried to claim I'm an expert on urban deer populations. I guess I'd ask Virgil to kind of jump in here as he sees fit, but I think certainly folks have made it very apparent that that they have concerns about some of the urban deer and the damage they cause or the issues they cause. But I think we've tried to, various approaches to that, but I have to defer to Virgil and other experts in the area.
Am I hearing voices
Yes, if anybody has an
other
open
than in my
mic,
head?
anybody has an open mic with some noise going on in the background, could you maybe mute yourself?
Great.
All right, I'm not
Thanks.
hearing anything now. Thank you.
I may bring this up again in second round.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other council questions regarding animal control? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Wason. I appreciate all you do. So I'm going to follow up on the deer question just because my question is has there been an increase in the last year of calls about urban deer?
Mr. Sauder.
It's Virgil Sauder, Director of Animal Care and Control. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There has not been a significant increase from previous years. We tend to see a fluctuation that kind of goes on a 2 to 3 year cycle. But right now we're kind of holding steady from previous years.
And I'm going to follow up on that and ask, what happens when you all get called to some, an urban deer issue? What happens?
Sure. The primary calls that we get had to do with injured or deceased deer. That is by far the majority of deer calls. When it comes to aggressive or trapped animals, the officers do respond, evaluate the situation. If we're able to identify the specific deer, especially in an aggressive situation, we do kind of get that description down so we can monitor it over the year and following years.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And on to any other questions that council may have. Councilmember Scambolari.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wason. I need you to educate me a little bit here. You mentioned that the euthanasia rate is 3%. Is that correct?
The mid-year euthanasia rate is 3%. Yes.
Right. And the live release rate was 82% or something like that, something close?
Yes, very close.
Okay. So, and I understand you have a goal of 90%, but so live release includes animals that have been adopted, animals that have been returned to owners, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So,
all animals that come into our care and then leave our care.
So 80%, 82% are live release, 3% are euthanized. What's the other 15%? Am I asking that question correctly?
Virgil will be able to dive in
Sure.
on this for you. Yep.
This is Virgil again. So that's an excellent question. What that means is that remainder are ones that are continued to be in our care. So those would be ones in foster homes or at the shelter being cared for.
Got it. Thank you. And a second, how much time do I have? Could you talk a little bit? I know that the new facilities at the shelter were a big investment, and I'd just be interested in hearing more. How is that working out? What kind of impact and I realize it's a weird year, but could you talk about the impact that that's had on staff and the work they do?
I'll jump in to start and then I'll ask Virgil to follow up. But what I can tell you is that the investments made at the facility have they've increased animal safety. They've increased staff safety. They've made tremendous improvements in just the overall life cycle of the build. A brand new building is going to last a lot longer, and it's easier to maintain. It's less expensive to maintain, et cetera, et cetera. But Virgil, why don't you jump in with some more specifics?
Yeah, the main difference we see on a daily basis is a decrease in transmissible diseases between animal populations. So we have less upper respiratory infection spreading from cats to cats and dogs to dogs. So that has made a big change in the amount of staff time it takes to care for those animals on a daily basis.
And that makes them less adoptable, I assume, right?
Yeah, exactly. When they're sick and ill, nobody wants to take that on, and they tend to have longer lengths of stay at the shelter as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sims, did I see a hand?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wason, again for number 2 of 7. And I'm sure you'll help us keep track of that as you go. One quick comment, though, with regard to deer, neighborhood deer. I want us to also think more in terms of them being involved in the neighborhood and around our neighbors, to be more of a human health issue, along with the deer tick and the Lyme disease and some of the other infections or diseases that can be transmitted to humans. Not so sure it'll change a lot and our tools that we use to work on this problem. But I think it'll change how we look at it mentally and add some urgency to the situation. So that's a comment. But my question is, your goal, or at least at the animal shelter, is to have 10% reduction in bite investigations. And I guess I was wondering how you come about measuring that or doing that. Do we somehow magically going to remove 10% of our aggressive dogs, or better train humans on how to react?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, the animal shelter, and Virgil have to jump in here and correct anything I say wrong, but, the shelter staff works very closely with the Monroe County Humane Association so that especially the animals that leave our care are fit to be out in the public. We're actually having some really in-depth discussions right now with all the staff members at the shelter about that specifically. But the reduction is that you want to have a combination of things occur here. So whether it's humane education for how to manage a difficult or bite-prone dog, it's assisting with behavioral programs. It's investing in different programs at the Humane Association that helps their clients. But yeah, Virgil, do you want to kind of jump in and be a little more specific than what I can be?
So a lot of it has to do with basically education work. We have seen this year an uptick in our bite cases being reported. Some of it has to do with results of COVID, more people being at home, more people walking dogs that haven't necessarily been out and socialized around people. So there is a little bit of an increase this year where we are attempting to address in the subsequent years as well. But mostly, again, it has to do with education of people involved.
Hey, thank you very much. I was getting more at a plan, and education is a good approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other council questions? Councilmember Rollo.
Thank
you. You are
you.
muted. Yeah.
Thank you. Following up on Council Vice President Sims' point, I think it's a really important one. I've been hearing, this is anecdotal, but I hear it very often that constituents are encountering ticks of various kinds. Many of them cause disease. So it's a complicated, deer impact the community in various ways. One is property damage, obviously, to things like gardens. Another is the hazard elements of hitting a deer. I understand BPD has to euthanize them by shooting them oftentimes. I think many people have witnessed injured deer wandering neighborhoods, probably to go off to die eventually. So it's an animal welfare issue. And then there's the human health component, which is very important. So, and then lastly, I've heard of people becoming so frustrated that they actually poison deer. I don't know if you can still hear my internet is unstable. But it seems to me that we should explore a wildlife management team in order to at least track populations and keep track of the number. And I wondered if Mr. Sauder or Mr. Wason would like to weigh in on this need, since it's apparent to me, it's continuing. We ought to at least be tracking populations, it seems.
Yeah, I'll jump in just on a general level. You know, as a council member, I've been part of city government for almost 15 years, full time now. And, you know, I don't know a year that urban deer hasn't been talked about. And so, you know, it is a community problem. It's a community-wide problem, or it's a community issue. And it's a community, you've very clearly outlined the detriments that can come from it. And, you know, whether it's a wildlife management team or a, you know, an offshoot of what was the deer task force. You know, there's so many options there, and I'll certainly be supportive of efforts to, you know, bring professionals together, have conversations with the community about this and such. But you know, do I think it's warranted? Certainly. I feel like I have an abundance of time to staff a task force right now. Maybe not, but you know, certainly happy to discuss what, you know, the council thinks are good approaches to this, what staff feels are. And so, you know, Virgil, if you want to add anything there, please do.
We have 10 seconds.
Just
Maybe-
want to add any kind of thing we do with numbers of deer in the city, it's a very difficult thing to do. Our city is designed for deer to move in and out of boundaries very easily. So it's not an easy ask, but it's definitely something we would definitely consider helping.
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right, seeing none from council, let us move to the public and see if there are any commenters on our animal control departmental budget.
I don't see any hands raised.
All right, nothing in our chat.
And no, I don't see anything in the chat unless Mr. Lucas has something.
All right, let's wait just a second or two. And then move on to council for any final questions or final comment on animal control. Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. I want to credit Animal Care Control because I think they do a marvelous job. You know, the declining euthanasia rate has been something I've been very, very happy about, and I'm sure they're pleased, and the community is as well. And maybe someday we'll get to zero euthanasia, and so I think they do an extraordinary job. And I hate to bring up a kind of a thorny question, but you know, there's no better place to put it since we're talking about animals than here. And that is the perpetual deer problem. And it is controversial because we know that there are people who are worried about if management proceeds, what type of management that would entail. But, you know, there have been advances since the Deer Task Force met. There are ways in which we can use non-lethal methods. Potentially, we might be able to get grant money for it. We had a Ball State study, and I have to disagree here with Mr. Sauder, that the urban deer population doesn't move. According to the Ball State study, it stays put in neighborhoods, and you see the same deer day in and day out, which is really quite different than what we thought was the case in Deer Task Force. And that means it's sort of an island effect that might lead it to be controlled through birth control. So the point is that I don't think we can ignore this. I don't think it's fair for the deer. I don't think it's good for the population. And it's becoming, I think, really, really important because if for no other reason than for human health, because tick-borne diseases could be very debilitating. And Councilmember Sims is right. You know, we really, for a human health perspective, we need to move forward on something. And I think it's incumbent on the city to form such a group. So I appreciate the discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Final comment on animal control. Councilmember Scambluri.
Yes, thank you. congratulations on all that you've succeeded at during this extraordinary year. This fuzzy cat behind me is Lucy, and her brother Linus is somewhere. And they started their life at the shelter. And so I am grateful for what your staff did to connecting with them. And I'm sure you've affected a lot of families the same way. So just thank you for what you do. And congratulations on that declining euthanasia rate. I think that's very exciting and a testament to your staff.
Well, great. Thank you for those comments, Councilmember. Linus and Lucy look very comfortable back there. Those kitty cats are quite, I will say the Wason family during COVID is now a new owner of Lando, the long-haired dachshund. So that came from the animal shelter. And so we're proud of our efforts. We are.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, did I see your hand?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mr. Sauder and Mr. Wason for all you do for the welfare of animals in our community and connecting animals with people. I agree with Councilmember Rallo and Councilmember Sims that the deer are a problem. The reason, you've been in city government, you said 15 years, and every year it's been an issue is because it's not going away because we haven't really addressed it. And I think it is overdue that we do address this issue. I think with the climate changing and things getting warmer, we're just going to see more and more ticks and other insects that are carried by the deer. And I think that we're already, in the last 5 years, seeing more aggressive deer than previously. So I'm in support of Councilmember Rallo's idea about a wildlife management task force, largely focused on deer, but it could expand to other species as well. But I think that it is high time that we address this. I know we've got, 72 things on our plates and COVID, and it's really hard to find the time, but I think we do need to do it. So, but thank you for your hard work, and hopefully we can work to address the deer issue as well.
Thank you. Anyone else for a final comment? Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sauder, and again, Mr. Wason. And in addition to recognizing you two, and all the folks there, I'd also like to give a shout out to the Animal Control Commission. Those are dedicated members of our community that have a big heart for animals, and they have learned, some of the folks that I'm aware of have learned a lot on the process. But having said that, I still want to, I don't want to hammer, but I want to keep it to the forefront, the human health issue. I don't think that I am violating any HIPAA rules or laws with discussion of medical. And I try to govern from a position of what's best for all involved. But this gets a little bit personal because I was actually bitten by a deer tick. I contracted Lyme disease. We caught it early. I'm hearing more and more of our citizens that are contracting this and having to deal with that. At the same time, one of the things that our city has a great appeal to others is a lot of our trails and our outdoor activities. I mean, so we're asking our population or putting them in a position that we can enjoy the outdoors. And I just don't want us to, in some cases, and it's no one's fault, but inadvertently putting our constituents in a potentially unsafe, debilitating, or worse situation. So the Deer Task Management Team, I think, is a good idea for further discussion, and I'd like to hear more going on in the future. And I will support at least the animal control this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last final comment? All right, seeing none. Clerk Bolden, let us call for the vote.
Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Thank you. Smith.
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
oh, Sims,
Yes.
and Rowland.
Yes.
All right, that's 9-0. Thank you very much to everyone. And we will now move on to the next piece, which is facilities.
Let's get unmuted. All right. Yeah, so presentation, Councilmember Sims, 3 of 7. Again, Adam Wason on behalf of the Public Works Department, presenting the 2021 budget request for the Facilities Maintenance Division. Simply put, facilities maintenance staff do all the things necessary to keep our buildings operational and maintained. They also do so much more, including the oversight of the Downtown Specialist Program that helps with downtown upkeep, as well as oversight of the Brighton B-Town efforts with financial support from Parks and Rec and the City of Bloomington Utilities Department. Another small but mighty staff, however, the four full-time equivalents do not include the seasonal workforce that makes up the Brighton B-Town crew. JD Boroff, Russell Flake, Barry Wallach, and Chris Smith are a great team to have on your side, whether responding to an after-hour needs at one of our buildings or helping tackle a major overhaul of the HVAC systems at City Hall. As the council is aware from Chief Moore's presentation earlier this week, we're working closely on needed repairs and maintenance at the various fire stations throughout the city, while also looking into the long-term needs of the department. I'll also, note that under JD's leadership, we have completed the capital facility data collection process and have compiled 5, 10, and 20-year maintenance plans, identifying which will further identify the concise costs that these capital maintenance plans would require. Not to harp on HVAC investments at City Hall, but we're currently in the process of installing the new approximately $200,000 cooling tower for City Hall. And that should be fully operational here over the next few weeks. I think they're actually working on the installation today, tomorrow, and maybe this weekend. For those that have visited the building recently, you probably noticed the scaffolding that was on the south end of the building for several weeks. Umphris Masonry, a long-standing expert in historic facade preservation, completed tuck pointing masonry repairs that will hopefully that better prevent some of the rainwater infiltration issues that we've experienced over the last few years. I'd really like to thank Dave Umphris and his crews for the great work, for their expertise, for again, well, I'll plead ignorance here. Masonry on a 100-year-old brick building is not my expertise, but in talking with Mr. Umphris and his team, the insight and the knowledge that they had was really tremendous. This slide here can highlight how the various departments and divisions of the city benefit from having an internal facilities maintenance division. For anything staff cannot complete in-house, they assist in overseeing the bid process and project management for projects at facilities other than City Hall. Facilities staff also does an excellent job coordinating the work of other divisions like the street department for the curb work highlighted here for the animal shelter. Just the overall coordination that takes place with the facilities team and all the other departments and divisions in the city is really great. Some 2020 further budget updates. Other facility improvements moving forward have a contract. We have a contract being awarded for new overhead doors at the fleet maintenance garage with the target date of completion by the end of the year. We're also keeping up with our staff training and professional development by having 2 staff members attend OSHA's 10-hour training course this year. And then we're also planning an additional 30-hour training course scheduled with risk management for all Department of Public Works divisions for the 4th quarter this year. I'd also like to share as part of our 2021 efforts that part of the recent investments we've made at in the HVAC system at City Hall, which I'll have you know has over 80 heating and cooling pumps in it. Those projects have been funded recently with the council support, and we've really appreciated that. part of our improving our technological advancements here involve plans for 2021 to have a digital and remote control system to monitor and make settings changes remotely. So in the future, instead of JD or another staff member having to physically respond to the building to make zone changes when council chambers might be a little too chilly, they'll be able to quickly do so from the comfort of an online setting. We're also partnering and requesting funds to partner with Parks and Recreation in 2021 to install the identical bollard system that we've put on Kirkwood here at City Hall around the southern parking lot where the farmers market takes place. So that's one where we would administer that project on there and fund that project for those improvements. As mentioned earlier, we're going to need to make some needed investments at our fire stations, and we continue, and again, we'll continue with our staff training development opportunities in 2021. Overall budget highlights can be summed up by stating that the increases we're seeing in category 3 are specific to higher commodity prices. I made a note here that says hopefully no one needs any treated lumber right now. That we're just seeing some increases across the board in a lot of the different things that we use and materials we use at the facilities department. The decreases in category 4 are related to the high price tags that were part of the HVAC renovations being completed this year. In summary, we're asking for about 14% less than 2020 based on the lower levels of high capital investments that we were making. The total budget request is just over $1 million and is like I said, a 14% reduction from 2020. For my final slide for facilities maintenance, you can see there's several highlights listed here that we're proud of. What I want to highlight though, and this goes to Councilmember Rallo's comments from earlier that I very much appreciated, is the tremendous effort, care, and expertise that the facilities maintenance staff pivoted to on a dime in order to respond to everything COVID-19. I'm going to say proud too many times here, but it made me very proud of the efforts of how they modified buildings, came up with air filtration plans, worked with our vendors to get proper PPE in place, distributed the PPE across the city. And they did so by relying on experts, by relying on the CDC research to make sure it's all done properly. So for that, I just want to say my sincerest thanks and kudos to JD, his team, and all the efforts that they put into responding to everything that has been COVID-19. So thank you very much. And I believe this is when I say I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wason, and for all the hard work that is represented there. I will say, Councilmember Sims, I have appreciated your support staff that comes in every once in a while and gives you a little pat on the back. That's really nice. I assume that that's Doris.
Actually, it's my son, and I'll try I'll try to keep my mute in order. Thank you.
No, you just happened to be on my screen when that presentation was going on. I keep seeing somebody coming in and giving you, I guess, assurance. Nice. Anyone have any specific questions here for facilities? And Councilmember Volan, were you just scratching your nose?
I was just shaking my head, that's all.
Okay. If there are no questions, maybe there are, maybe there aren't. I'm not seeing any. We shall go to the public and see if the public has any comments to make. I'm seeing shaking of a head from Clerk Bolden. So back to council for any final comment. And if there is no final comment, once again, Mr. Wason, you represent the hardest working individuals at the City Hall and beyond. So thank you for that report. Let us now move on to the next one.
We need to do a
which
vote.
Is.
Do you want to do a do pass recommendation?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I keep forgetting that we've got to do that. Let's call for the vote.
Okay. Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
9-0. Thank you for that. And now we move into fleet maintenance.
All righty. So 4 of 7. Again, I don't know that I need to say my name every time, but Adam Wason on behalf of the Public Works Department presenting the 2021 budget request for the Fleet Maintenance Division. The Fleet Maintenance Division, in my humble opinion, can be considered the behind-the-scenes heroes who keep the city operational 24/7, 365. The dedication and experience of staff is critical to keeping the over 600 assets they are responsible for up and running so city services can be delivered efficiently. The 10 FTEs at Fleet Maintenance have continued to operate without interruption throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Our major initiatives in 2021 are consistent with the past several years of initiatives where we're looking to become more efficient through the use of technology, data, and metrics. So far in 2020, Fleet Maintenance staff has completed 503 preventative maintenance items, and given some of the changing priorities throughout the year, we're having to kind of take a wait and see approach to some of our capital purchases and things. You know, the idea, I think we're going to be able to fund the tow truck that we were hoping to, which will help us reduce our towing costs tremendously. But we're making sure that we can weather the storm of being an internally funded division of the city, given some of the revenue reductions to departments like Street and Parks and Rec and others. We're still moving forward with the purchase of a mobile preventative maintenance unit for efficiency in performing on-site oil changes that will, reduce the fuel consumption of all vehicles needing to come to instead of the vehicles needing to come to the fleet garage, we'll be able to actually go to them. So when you think of maybe there's 4 vehicles out at the Monroe Water Treatment Plant, or out at Blucher Pool or Dillman Road, or out at Twin Lakes, all the different facilities we have, if we can send a mobile unit to them, we'll be increasing not only our overall or decreasing our overall fuel consumption, but being more efficient in doing those on site. As I mentioned in our administrative budget presentation, we've had some hiccups with some of our software implementation projects with outside contractors. We've got that example here with the Lucity Asset Management System for fleet maintenance. We're almost there, and we're looking forward to getting this critical software functionality up and running. To really modernize the way in which we track vehicle maintenance, communicate with staff members assigned to supervise and use the vehicles, and to coordinate routine and preventative maintenance in a better way. We're currently working with the vendor to explore some virtual training opportunities and a remote implementation for the final steps if those travel restrictions continue. With the council's support in 2020, we were able to move forward with this important project and investment. So Lucity, as I've been talking about, is currently developing a report function for the new vehicle points analysis. It's one of the last steps needed to finalize our applications, which will include some better ways to track the diesel exhaust fluid usage for the various city departments. Some other 2020 budget highlights I'd like to go through is that we're working to formalize, like I said, the DEF tracking for the different departments. And we're also hoping towards the end of this year and into 2021 to really implement a robust GPS telematics system. Funding's, again, pretty uncertain for this year, but we're really committed to moving this project forward. This will allow city departments to better monitor vehicle usage, idle times, driving behaviors, and vehicle locations. This may show my public works nerdiness, but I really look forward to the day when our residents can simply go to our website and see where the trash or recycling truck is on the route, or where the snowplow is in their neighborhood during a snow event. As is the theme, you can probably notice developing in this presentation is that major capital purchases we're taking a wait and see approach. We are hopeful to implement a more robust inventory management system in 2020. And again, just kind of holding off on on those major purchases while we wait and see where revenues come in for some of the departments. Again, thanks to the council's support, we've been able to continue investing in cost and safety improvements by investing in the needed tools and equipment to service the wide variety of vehicles we're responsible for. We've also been investing in more fuel efficient vehicles, including the purchase of 2 all-electric Chevy Bolts that have just arrived in the last month or so. We're also working with all city departments to try to identify the 20 most underutilized vehicles within the entire fleet and looking at ways to better deploy those amongst the various departments. Another project that we've been able to implement this year is that we have put in a car and truck wash at the fleet garage. That should be fully functional in the next few days or few weeks. We'll now be able to wash our own vehicles, which is really beneficial when you have dump trucks hauling salt, BPD squad cars on the road 24/7, and passenger vehicles that now use local car washes. Again, in the spirit of efficiency, we want to keep up the preventative maintenance, keep up high levels of preventative maintenance goals in 2021. If we're able to properly meet best management practices for preventative maintenance, it lowers the overall lifetime cost of service to the vehicle. Preventative maintenance, just as a brief reminder, includes some of the more basic, the very basic things of maintenance on a vehicle, like oil changes, and then inspection of all the other critical vehicle functions. Now, moving on to routine maintenance, which involves more significant items such as tire changes, brake jobs, radiator flushes, and transmission fluid changes. We're going to, again, continue to try to do these at cycles of best management practices. This is one of my favorite pictures that we'll present tonight. While it doesn't exactly represent routine maintenance activities, this picture does represent something that routinely happens at the fleet maintenance garage. The fleet maintenance technicians and mechanics, they come up with innovative solutions to sometimes complex issues. Frank and Ryan here are holding devices that help make the bollard installation and removal process for Kirkwood much more ergonomic and easier to complete for those staff members that undertake those initiatives. The team down there got creative. They manufactured and machined these devices over a couple hours and days to in response to our crews seeking a better way to do this. I'd be remiss to say all the staff members at Fleet have that creativity about them that can make tough situations manageable and tough repairs. I've seen some ingenious things that they have done down there to get old fire trucks running, or to fill a floorboard that's caving through with a street sign, to any number of things. But they're routinely being very creative down at the Fleet Maintenance Garage. As with many public works operations, the fleet technicians are on call 24/7, 365. If a fire truck breaks down in the middle of the night, we're going to respond, and we're going to try to assist to get that up and running as quickly as possible. Fuel management is another big responsibility for fleet maintenance. We're continually striving to find ways to reduce fuel consumption, increase fuel efficiency in our vehicles that we purchase, and to meet all of the regulatory guidelines required of us for managing 2 different fuel sites. Major 2020 budget request and goal is to add automated I'm probably going to butcher this, but diesel exhaust fluid, for a lack of a better term, dispensers or pumps at our fueling stations. Right now, we have to buy these by the large barrel and by the case. And it's a newer additive for diesel vehicles over the last several years. So what we're hopeful to do is to get some bulk tanks at each of our fueling stations, so then we can easily track the usage amongst the city departments and have a very easy way for staff to add that as needed and required. Another major investment and part of our 2020 budget goals is to get a small outdoor storage barn to free up much needed and valuable square footage in the fleet garage. We are also going to look to investing in a card reader for the car and truck wash to be able to track usage amongst departments there as well. Just overall categorical budget highlights include increases in category 2 across the board, just based on expected fuel pricing, and then as well as some price increases for some of the most frequently purchased parts and equipment, things that we use for repairs. Category 3 increases can be related to the estimated increase in water costs for the car and truck wash, as well as for the newer fuel tank inspection services that are going to be required moving forward. Category 4 increases are directly related to the purchase of the diesel exhaust fluid stations at our fueling sites. In summary, we're requesting a $3.66 million budget for fleet maintenance in 2021, which is a 9% increase from 2020. Again, proud is an understatement when it comes to the service provided and the expertise that the staff at Fleet Maintenance have. The staff can do everything from fix a chainsaw or a weed eater to overhaul a hydraulic system on a solid waste truck. They do so in the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter, and sometimes under a snow plow that is dripping snow and ice on them while they work on it. My thanks and kudos go out to each of the mechanics, the support staff, and to Jason Spear as the Director of Fleet Maintenance. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Wason, and kudos to all the MacGyvers in the Fleet Division.
They are certainly MacGyvers.
Yes, indeed. That is much appreciated. People who can fix things. All right, Councilmember Piedmont Smith, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I heard you say that in category 2, there was an increase in the budget because of higher fuel costs, or maybe it was category 3, I don't know. And I'm just curious about that because when we heard the Bloomington Transit budget, they budgeted less for fuel because they're expecting lower fuel costs. So are we talking about different kind of fuel, or what's up with that? We can't hear you.
I should unmute myself. Yeah, so I didn't get to see Lou's presentation. You know, we're pretty conservative and pretty, well, given the volatile nature of the commodity from time to time, we try to be rather conservative in our projections and such. And but you know, Jason, I don't know if you want to jump on and answer any more, but it's just our best guess, you know, to see what.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So we base our fuel pricing off of a 5-year average. So if you had a couple years ago that it was 4 something a gallon, and now it's around 2, based off that average, it's showing an increase. Plus, we're also increasing our fleet size to where, you know, 30 or 40 vehicles a year. So the cost of those is what we include that as well.
Thank you. And I think part of it may also be that BT bids for, you know, some big quantity over a few years. So maybe that's a difference as well.
Yeah,
they probably
go ahead, Jason, please.
They probably get a better pricing because they only use diesel, so they're probably getting a lot cheaper price to where we buy diesel and gas, and then we get it from different vendors. They're probably getting all theirs from the same vendor for they're probably doing a yearly bid.
Okay, thanks for the details.
Thank you. Other council questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just a quick one. Somewhere in one of your slides near the bottom had a bullet point about decreasing carbon emissions by reducing idle time of non-emergency city vehicles by 10% through the deployment of GPS telematics. Can you talk a little bit more about that approach and what will happen?
Yeah, so, as I spoke to earlier, we're hopeful to get a real robust GPS telematics system. It'll not only track idle times, but drive behaviors, locations, et cetera. But, so we would try to do some benchmarking very early on based on idle times and seek some of those reductions through educational campaigns, enforcement campaigns. I think it's fair to say that although we have a no idling policy citywide for non-emergency vehicles, that's not always adhered to. And so it's not a big brother effort as much as it is just a good management effort. There are certain vehicles at utilities, for instance, that they might not be considered public safety vehicles, but they're public water supply vehicles, and they may need to idle for certain reasons. But what we really want to avoid is the worksite idling, the unnecessary idling, and to try to really kind of tackle that issue as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation so far, Mr. Wason. Quick question. Now we have some protected bike lanes in our midst coming, and then the Adams Street. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Do we have something in the fleet to keep those clear of like snow, debris from cars, and all that stuff, or do we need to budget that for a new purchase?
We think we've got some smaller Bobcats and some things that we think could be utilized in the time being. We're going to be really researching, especially as we add more and more of these protected bike lanes and things, what equipment's going to do it the best and most efficiently and all that. But I think we've got some interim plans to use some equipment we already have. So for instance, some of our Bobcat attachments include a big, large brush. Some of them include, the snowplow. So yeah, we've got some options. I know that was part of the discussion with the planning and transportation and engineering team as we were planning for the Adams Street project. So yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? And seeing no other questions from council, let us go to the public for any public comment that may be in the chat room or anyone with a raised hand. I am seeing a head shake. Can I get confirmation that there are no members of the public waiting to speak?
I don't see any members of the public with their hands raised. Mr. Lucas? Oh, okay.
All right, back to council for final comment. And with no further comment, let us go to the vote. Madam Clerk.
Yes. Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
Scambaluri?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Rowland?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
And Flaherty?
Yes.
All right, that is 9-0. And now we are moving on to parking services.
Unmute myself. Yes, unmute myself. Alrighty, so we're starting to see the finish line. We're on to presentation 5 of 7 for the newly proposed Parking Facilities Division of Public Works. While it doesn't exist at this time, we are requesting the council support in making organizational changes that will centralize all things parking as recommended in the Desmond Parking Study to a Parking Services Division under the umbrella of Public Works. 2020 has been a busy year when it comes to parking. After bringing on our first ever parking services director in 2019, as recommended by the Desmond report, the newly proposed parking services division would be looking to maintain or to manage the parking enforcement aspects, the permitting, meter maintenance, garage management, and be responsible for making further recommendations on how we can improve the experience of parking for residents and visitors alike. Due to COVID-19, garages have been open and free to all users in March through August 1st, due to reduced travel, reduced demand, and to help lower costs to businesses and visitors of the downtown. As I mentioned, they remained free and open until August 1st, when we required parking, when we went back to putting the gates down and having all paid for services there. And so the result in these revenue reductions is that some of our cosmetic improvements that we were looking to make in 2020 have been delayed until some of those revenues stabilize. While we did hold off on cosmetic improvements at some of our parking facilities, we did not hold off on maintenance and needed repair projects. We enclosed the northeast stair tower of the Morton Street parking garage, and we replaced the dilapidated staircase contained in it. We also completed epoxy injections and other structural repairs to make sure we are meeting the best management practices to get the full life of the garages. We were hopeful to get the 4th Street garage rebuilt in 2020, but as everyone's intimately aware, there were project delays there that we are now hoping to get it open by August 1st of 2021. Based on what we've seen since August 1st, we're hopeful revenues are on the rebound. Our permit sales have gone up tremendously, our daily parkers are up, and so we're really hoping that we can kind of be on the rebound with our revenues at the garages. As mentioned earlier, the first 4 goals are carryovers, listed here are carryovers into 2021 due to not being completed in 2020. We're also looking to complete levels 1 and 2, on levels 1 and 2, a slab on grade repair at the, Ryan will have to explain that. I don't know what it means. Slab on grade repairs at the Walnut Street garage. And then completing some final stages of exterior work on the Morton Street garage. While I recognize the replacement of the 4th Street garage and the building of the new Trades District garage did not come without controversy and some delays, we do look forward to getting these structures up and running and serving the community and its visitors in 2021. The Park Smart certification is still set to be the first in Indiana. As stated, bringing parking enforcement to the Parking Services Division is being done so after much contemplation, research, and at the recommendation of the Desmond Parking Study. As I stated to some longtime staff members in parking enforcement, it's like they're coming back home, as the Department of Public Works was the longtime home of all things parking previously. Our overall budget highlights include moving Plan 2020 projects into 2021, as well as the needed wayfinding signage for the replacement garage at 4th Street and the new Trades District garage. One major pivot we had to do due to COVID-19 in 2020 was moving all permit sales to an online platform. Staff, both at the parking garages and with Michelle Wall and Rayanne Cox and customer service staff in the controller's office, did a tremendous job of working under tight deadlines to get the system up and running with very minimal complaints. Overall, that $10,000 we expended in 2020 would not be needed in 2021. And I just want to reflect on this even a little bit more. Back in, it was probably April and May, started peppering Michelle with questions of, hey, how quickly can we turn around online parking sale or parking permit sales only? And I think I can still picture the exact look she gave me when I asked that question. And it was like, you've got to be kidding me. And, just again, proud of the efforts, proud of the pivoting. They really, moving from no online options at all for purchasing parking permits to an only online option really shows the dedication and the expertise and the ability that we've got in our parking services area. Moving on to some highlights of some of the parking meter funds. You'll see a major expenditure here and a 377% increase to Category 2 supplies. This is the result of needing to upgrade our meter technologies to a 4G, 5G platform from the original 2G platform. I'll just state now that if anyone has any technical questions on this one, I'll be turning it over to Michelle and Rayanne for answers faster than you know it. Here's the overall budget summary showing a net increase of 6% when all organizational and capital changes are taken into account. That's a $5.484 million budget request and an increase of $331,000 over 2020. Next. Again, this is a major organizational shift that we're requesting of the council, and I'm sure there will be some robust discussions. I do want to thank Michelle and Rayanne and all the folks that work on all the various parking issues here at the city. You know, when it was becoming apparent that Public Works was going to be the requested new home of all things parking enforcement, I thought, oh, yay, one of the more controversial topics that could come to Public Works, and we'll handle it just like we do everything else, with grace, patience, and great care. So be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you again, Mr. Wason. Council, do we have questions? Councilmember Volan.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Wason, for the presentation so far. I haven't had a lot to say here, but what you just said now at the very end is what piqued my interest. You talked about taking great care to think about parking services, which is coming back to Public Works. But some of the other things you said in the presentation, you know, sort of hint at sort of the way that Public Works used to think about things like parking, which was all about the cars. It's all about getting the cars parked. And, you know, fortunately, I didn't hear anything about getting them parked cheaply, but there are many of us who have concerns about how much parking supply we're providing. And so I just wanted to say that generally, but specifically, does Public Works talk at all about non-car parking? Is non-car parking going to have a priority in Public Works? Does Public Works have anything to do with increasing, for example, bicycle parking? And to what extent will that be a priority in this new regime?
Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember Rowland. Yes, I think our dedication to providing parking to things that are non-traditional automobiles has been pretty apparent in the last several discussions, whether it was about the bicycle lockers and different motorcycle parking at the replacement garage and new garages. You know, the inclusion of oh shoot, there's a technical name for them that we're using, but the bike corrals. So you know, as part of the Kirkwood enhancements, we really made the parking corral right outside of Uptown and Trojan Horse more robust with a concrete pad and more bike hoops. We've done bike corrals there on the north side of the square. So absolutely, yes, we'll continue to, we will dedicate, prioritize, and balance all users of the network and follow, you know, I recognize as much as anyone, you know, the comp plan, the transportation plan, all of those things want to prioritize all, you know, the bicycle and pedestrians.
Okay.
So, yes.
Let me just follow up quickly with the question. Who, besides Michelle Wall, the new Parking Services Director, will be involved with setting pricing on parking? Like, how many people will be involved in that decision within Public Works and without?
Well, you know, I'm going to rely on Michelle as the hired professional. She's got, well, I wouldn't dare say a number of years experience, but she's got many years of experience in managing high-level parking operations. But I don't think any one person would ever be responsible for setting parking pricing. I think it's a collaborative effort amongst many city departments, amongst the city council, amongst...
My time is up. Thank you. Appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I think I support this you know, shift in staffing and a division in Public Works. The one thing I'm still kind of chewing on and thinking about is what we heard in ESD's presentation the other day about the Transportation Demand Management Program. And just knowing the context and history of that, and that a lot of the program and anticipated actions interact with parking in a pretty significant way. And we implemented this, the study and are developing the program in part to manage parking demand in the downtown. And I'm wondering if Public Works was another, and specifically the parking division is another thought I had about a place where it could fit well. And again, I'm just thinking through these things still. So I was just curious to hear your perspective on, the relative advantage or not of it being elsewhere versus in a parking division.
I don't know if I'd today tell you I have a stated opinion if transportation demand management, the overall management of the plan would fall to Public Works or a combination of city departments, or where it would exactly land. I think I look at it from a perspective that we're really looking to manage the parking infrastructure and the staff and the meter maintenance and all of those things. And I think we'll be wherever it lands, we'll be a strong partner in everything transportation demand management. And I do know, based on discussions with Michelle, and she has experience in past positions with assisting with the implementation of transportation demand management. So I think there will be a role where it actually lives. I don't know if I'd give an opinion at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I had a question about the move of the parking enforcement staff from the police department to Public Works, back to Public Works. Is it going to be the same number of FTE that were in the police department?
Yeah, it's a shift of the FTEs that are part of the parking enforcement staff at BPD right now. So yes, it would be a one-for-one shift there.
I ask because I know that the role of the parking enforcement officers within BPD has sort of expanded in recent years to deal with some public safety issues, maybe a few cleanup issues. Can you speak to that at all as to whether their role will be much more focused when they move back to Public Works?
Well, what I can say is that, there will be some pretty significant changes there, whether it's the type of lights on the vehicles. Public Works vehicles don't have red, white, and blue lights on the top of them. So we've been thinking about all those things. In terms of traffic management and things. In terms of the parking enforcement officers are still going to be eyes and ears on the ground, whether or not they have an actual official BPD radio on their shoulder or a cell phone, call to dispatch when they, have needs or want to draw attention to specific issues. And I think a lot of those things will carry over, and absolutely. But specifically for some of them, for say traffic management with a car in the road with red, white, and blue lights, no, we'll be moving to more traditional Public Works strobe lights and things like that.
So are there added costs then because of changes to vehicles or lights or things like that?
Yes, there would obviously be some costs. We'll try to keep those as minimal as possible. But yes.
Those are accounted for in your budget proposal?
Yes, we would, yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Other questions? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Since the parking cars is, part of the transportation, right? Like how you get to and from a place, will planning and transportation staff also be involved in decisions on setting prices for parking?
I would assume, yeah, I would just state that there would be a lot of city staff members and, folks involved in that. But I think it would be a combination of city staff, the administration, the council, all of the folks that still will touch parking in some way.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from council? Before we move to a public comment period? Anyone with a raised hand or anyone who's typing something in our chat room with response to parking services?
I don't see any. Oh, there is a raised hand. So it's Mr. Alexander, and I'm going to unmute him now.
Hi, thanks. I'm Greg Alexander again. Two things I want to draw your attention to. First off is that parking within Public Works does actually wind up responsible for sidewalks. If somebody just abandons a car on the sidewalk or in a bike lane, it winds up at the desk of somebody in Public Works, as near as I can tell. And they have not done a good job at this so far. It takes like a week and a half to tow an abandoned vehicle out of a bike lane. A week and a half to tow an abandoned vehicle out of a bike lane. There's businesses that every single day that they're open, they park cars on the sidewalk, and they're not doing anything effective. You know, this could be solved very quickly with just a single trip with a tow truck. If that business started losing cars to a tow truck, they would respond immediately. But because it's a ticket, they just kind of work their way out of it and hope that the number of tickets is not significant enough to offset the advantage they get by using the sidewalk as parking. That's a safety violation, but it's being treated as basically a parking revenue problem. And then the other side is BTOP started 15 years ago almost, counting parking garages with just 3 or 4 volunteers, and we showed that there was a lot of excess space, even though the administration at that time wanted to build a new parking garage. I am still doing that on occasion with just my own labor, and as we've had more and more city staff dedicated to this parking problem, I've been hoping that if they wouldn't give informed opinions, that at least they would give the information, and that hasn't been. It's still very difficult to find out if parking garages are paying for themselves. It's difficult to find out if the parking garages are empty, and they are. I can just tell you right now, in 5 years, the 4th Street garage will typically not be over 60% occupants, and the Trades District garage will probably be even lower. And they should be able to tell you that at least in 5 years. I'd hope they'd be able to tell you that too. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
No, I don't see any hands raised. If you want to give it a next or second or two, and I don't think that I got any messages in the chat either.
Okay. Then we will go back to council to see if anyone would like to ask a question that would follow up on that. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, related question, kind of about data availability, essentially. I've been meaning to ask Michelle Wall about this, but I just haven't reached out yet, and I'm kind of curious. I know there's maybe some technology challenges to knowing, and I'm thinking about not just garages, but all parking and just looking at utilization. So, meter spaces by block or even individual space, the garages for sure, and revenue streams and funding and all that kind of stuff. I'm interested in digging in a little bit more, and as council members, to make informed decisions about pricing parking, like that's data we really need to know as well. So could you just speak to what's available, any gaps there are, and any technology issues related to that, or if it's, can you just talk a little bit about that, Mr. Wason?
I'm going to defer to Michelle here. She's going to be the best person to answer this. And Michelle, are you available to answer that?
Sure. Thanks, Matt, for your question. Right now, I've been on staff for a year, and there are some technology and data questions that I have that when the parking services and the parking enforcement officers and their information about meters and reporting, things like that, that is something I'm definitely going to work towards finding someone that can mine that data and make sure that we have the appropriate information at the appropriate time. It is something that I'm working on. It is lacking a little as my observations in the first year, but I'm hoping to turn that around in the next year.
Okay, great. Maybe a follow-up conversation at some point would be
absolutely
helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure. You bet.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Wason, how much revenue is produced overall by parking and permits, et cetera?
Wonderful question. I'm going to have to dig on that one, council member, and we'll have to follow up on that one. I don't know that Michelle would have Great. I don't know if Michelle has all that right in front of her or not, but we can certainly follow up.
Sounds like Councilmember Vola may have something to contribute.
I do know a little bit about this. When the 2016 report was compiled, we calculated that overall parking amounted to roughly 7% of that year's annual budget. But that really depends on how you measure it. The figure is in the mid seven figures, somewhere in the $5 to $7 million range when you add revenues from every source. In 2016, the overall parking system generated a net revenue of around $200,000, $300,000 on revenues of 5, 6, 7 million. So that should give you a sense of the scope of the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any council member have a question? Or I'm sorry, this is fine. Are we in final comment? Councilmember Bowen?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. So this is another, I'm of course deeply involved in parking issues since it's such a big deal for District 6. I just want to say that I have particularly enjoyed working with Michelle Wall. I think she's a great hire. I'm glad that we have a parking services director, and I'm glad that we're consolidating most parking services. You know, that's a good name for a division. I'm not even sure I have any particular issue with it being housed in Public Works. What I am concerned about is what I was concerned about when we were first talking about meters. How does the decision to manage transportation demand get made, among whom? I'm pretty confident by now that it's not going to be siloed in any one department. I think Public Works needs to have significant say in the pricing of parking. I think that the mayor's office, the city council, I think that the city clerk needs to have a say in how parking is priced. But I will still maintain that it's important for, above all, for planning and transportation, why they have that name, to be foremost among all the rest of us in deciding policy. They're the ones who their main focus is our planning documents, and specifically our transportation plan. That's pretty clearly called for, transportation demand management. The administration has responded appropriately by planning to hire transportation. I mean, it's one of the few hires being made this year. So I'm encouraged by all of that. I just, want to make sure that we don't find ourselves sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of shrugging about this policy. It is excruciatingly important. It's one of the most important policies we could have. Doesn't seem like it, but it's important and it's complicated. Parking is never going to get any easier. It's only going to get more complicated because it's a service that serves a variety of people for a variety of different reasons. So with all that said, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I am definitely looking forward to seeing this division take off. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other final comments from council? Seeing none, let us go to our vote. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rollo,
Yes.
Scambaluri,
Yeah.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Volan,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you, and that is 9-0. Now it looks like we're headed towards sanitation.
There we are. Lost my mute bar. So just two more to go. This is our 2021 budget request for the sanitation division. Another group of hardworking unsung heroes that have kept the city up and running throughout these crazy times we're living in. My utmost thanks and respect go out to the men and women the women and men that make up the sanitation division. Whether it's 100 degrees out, -5 degrees out, or during a global pandemic, these crews work tirelessly day in and day out to make sure solid waste, recycling, yard waste, and large item pickup goes on uninterrupted. With 24 FTEs and now being in our third year of the new modernized and automated system, we're starting to see the light of having a fully operational back-end, excuse me, a fully operational back-end hardware, software support system that will collect valuable data on the trends of sanitation service utilization by Bloomington residents. There we go. To further explain the new routeware system status and what it all will do is we have new hardware being installed next week, and staff is working with the vendor to correct some minor software issues. Installation of, as I mentioned in the admin budget presentation early on tonight, the installation and progress on this was severely impacted by COVID-19 travel restrictions. However, the software with some older hardware we had on the trucks has been collecting operational data for the last several weeks, and we will be able to have some benchmark metrics set for solid waste and recycling participation rates by the end of the fourth quarter. I am a bit hesitant to say it's strong benchmarking, just in the sense that, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, our solid waste figures have been impacted heavily by COVID, and I'll get into some specifics here soon. The new routeware system has also been used for all billing, as opposed to some spreadsheets and some other issues we'd had with our past program. Overall, the division has not achieved the recycling diversion rate so far this year that we hope to. We're currently at about 30% diversion, and our goal is set at 40%. 40% is pretty ambitious. It's we try to be ambitious with that goal, but I think we've got several factors of why we're not meeting that expectation as we'd hoped. So what I can tell you is that when we look at our overall collection rates and such, COVID has had a tremendous impact. Oh shoot, I can't get to the spreadsheet. Sharing my screen. What we know is that March, April, and May, we saw tremendous increases in the tonnages of solid waste that we picked up. We saw increases in the amount of recycling we were picking up. The stay-at-home orders, the restaurant ordering, all the things, whether it's the spring cleanings, all spring, every closet in the house getting cleaned, you name it. We were starting to see dramatic increases there. Another big COVID impact was we weren't able to do our neighborhood cleanups as we usually do, due to the need for close personal interaction during those projects. As far as our yard waste collection, so far this year, we've collected 33 tons of material, and we've also sold additional 72 yard waste containers. The division also collects 20 solid waste and 20 recycling containers over throughout the downtown and at city parks. And for 2021, we're hoping to get the neighborhood cleanup partnerships revamped and going again. We're really, it's not a year of general budget excitement, but we're really excited to get the routeware system fully functional for the deep digs into the data sets it will be collecting. Councilmember Volan, you'll appreciate this, but I truly cannot wait to send you the first sets of benchmark data later this year for us to dig deep on.
I'm excited.
I know you are. While I mentioned the difficulty in reaching our recycling diversion goals, I'll also add now that I'm sure this is something many of you have followed. The recycling markets are in utter disarray worldwide, and that's having very real fiscal impacts here locally. We're now spending well over $100,000 per year to have our recycling processed based on these international changes. Again, in 2020, we'll continue our yard waste efforts in earnest, and we'll be partnering and participating in some of the leafing innovation pilot projects that we're exploring with the street department and the innovation cohort. We'll also continue to service all city-owned facilities and city parks. Overall budget highlights here. We've got the fuel cost increases that we're expecting, as well as some higher set rates from the fleet maintenance division. You know, those brand new trucks 3 years ago are now 3 years old. Their warranties are coming up. Their repair costs are also rising. So we expect to see increases there. Overall, it's a $2.99 million request, which is about $124,000 over 2020 and 4.3%. Again, you know, just want to say thanks to all the staff, to Rhea Carter, our sanitation director, Denise Kinzer, our office manager, all the men and women that go out day in and day out to provide this essential city service. I can tell you, I think I've mentioned in past years of budget hearings that, you know, I often get stopped in the grocery store on different things to talk about with city operations and public works. And I can 100% assure you that the number one positive remark I get is about the trash carts and about the ease and of the new system and stuff. So, you know, it's had some challenges, but very proud of the efforts there overall. I guess this is what I'd say. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Thanks again, Mr. Wason. We're going to kick it back to council now for council questions. I see Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Wason. Almost all there. One more to go.
Yes.
Again, when we first talked about the automated system, one of the selling points for me, at least, and I think many of us, was the human impact and lessening of injuries and that sort of thing. So how are we doing in that regard with regard to on-the-job injuries and things associated with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was very much a change made for, you know, the human impact with the workers and such. I won't lie to you, Councilmember Sims. I'm struggling with the shared. Oh, actually, no, I'm not sharing my screen anymore. I can probably get to that number pretty quickly. Here we go. I can tell you, so there's been a tremendous reduction year over year. We had 1 year since automation where we had one major cost injury that kind of skewed the numbers. Overall, the number of injuries are down, the severity of injuries are down, and we can get you a much more specific report on that as part of our follow-up. But yes, it's had a great impact. You know, I hear it through the crews on a regular basis, you know, in terms of the lessened physical requirements that they have. So yes, it's had a positive impact, and we can share specifics soon.
Okay, thank you. I have a little bit of time left too. I noticed on our recycle cart that we've got new stickers on the top. I think it's important to say don't put used needles, either trash or recycle. But the newest one, I think it's the black label that basically gives you a phone number to call or to go to the city's website with regard to what items or the acceptable recycle items.
Mm-hmm.
Just for future reference, I don't think that's very user friendly. And maybe there's a better way we could do that to help on the user end. For one, we know we can recycle plastic, but once you go on the website, then it tells you a whole list of certain types of plastic that are unacceptable. And I'm not so sure how many folks would go to, say, the film covered plastic as opposed to, you know, acceptable plastic. So therefore, I think that leads to a lot of contaminated recycle, which causes a problem for you all. So in my mind, that's more of a user friendliness issue. I'm about out of time, but I just wanted to get that out there. So something for us to think about as we move forward.
Yeah, and if I could real quickly respond to that,
I'm sorry. I think we're out of time. So
well, I'll make a point to respond to it somehow.
Thank you.
Would someone like to throw in a softball? Councilmember Scambolari.
Please go on, Mr. Wason.
As I've said to a few folks today, I am the cleanup batter, so we'll try to hit a grand slam with this softball. Councilmember Sims, what I can tell you is that we struggled with how we were going to make this change. If I could go back to 3 years ago, I would have never put the graphic on the carts that said exactly what's recyclable, because we've seen such major changes across the industry. This was our attempt, our initial attempt here to just at least get folks to recognize that, hey, there's been changes, and we've tried to do it through social media. We've tried to do it through news articles. The plastic bags are no longer acceptable. The certain styrofoam's no longer acceptable. And we didn't want to just go put a new graphic that may change next month on there. And while it may not be the most user-friendly to have to visit the website, we're just trying to get folks to look for specific information on what's currently recyclable. If we have a major change in a particular commodity that's not going to be accepted going forward, we're going to hit the media efforts really hard. We're going to hit the sanitation bill and the utilities mailings really hard. We're going to do door hangers or different things, but this was our attempt to just make some progress there based on what's changed. So, but I do appreciate the sentiment. I surely do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Scambolari, I forgot. Yes.
Yeah, and just with my minute and a half, we're going to talk about leaf collection on the street, right?
Yes, we will. Absolutely.
Oh, hang on to my question. Thanks.
Any other question? All right, not seeing any council hands coming up here. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Rosenberg.
No, it's okay. We looking at composting?
So what we've done is we've permitted private haulers to pick up composting in the city. So not to get too into the weeds here, but city code limits the ability of private haulers to service single family residents of 4 units or less for any type of waste removal. But so what we did is we've opened it up to 2 private haulers to be able to pick up compost for any city residents that want to participate. We've been researching, other communities that offer curbside. We are just simply not in a place financially right now to make a major program investment there citywide. We raised our rates to the highest end of the range currently approved by the city council. I think it would require, it certainly would require a legislative change, and but something we want to encourage on the household level. We want to encourage with the private haulers, but hasn't been something that we've been able to just jump on and offer as a city service yet.
Wait, so we can compost right now?
Yeah. I can't think of the names of the 2 different companies that offer curbside.
Good Earth Compost.
Good Earth, is that right?
Is Good Earth one of them?
I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Is it?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Have drop-off locations at
yeah. Is my time up? I mean, I would be up for revisiting actually like people paying full price for compost.
Yeah.
I think people would be up for that if it's, relatively affordable, but not subsidizing it potentially, even though it's a good thing to subsidize, but covering the cost just so people have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we look at it from the perspective of what new equipment purchases would be required, how much staffing would be required. We've got some good information and research we've done on that. It's costly, and especially if you're going to run set routes like we do with trash and with the solid waste and recycling. It's Green Camino, I believe, is the name of at least one of the companies that's licensed.
Yeah. Green Camino is now Earth Keepers. So I'll follow up via email. Okay.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? And seeing no more questions from council, let's go to the public and see if anyone has a hand raised or a note in the chat.
Yes, first up we have Joseph Wynea. And Mr. Wynea, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead.
Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Very good. I would first like to say thanks to Mr. Wason for your marathon of presentations, including this one on sanitation. And also just to mention I'm a new resident to the city of Bloomington, and I'm very excited about becoming active in the sustainability and particularly waste management efforts of the city. And I'm glad to hear that 2 council members already touched on the topics that I'd hoped to mention, which were considering municipal compost services and also the tops of the bin labels for the recycling materials. So I just wanted to add one more question, actually 2 suggestions and 1 question. No, I'll let my question first. Has the city performed a municipal solid waste audit to get an idea of how it's performing with the recycling metrics?
And this is not a back and forth, so if you pose a question, we might get to it later.
Oh,
this is
yes.
a comment period.
I'm sorry, that's right. Okay, then I will quickly add a couple of suggestions, and that is to potentially use a QR code with a link to a printable document with recyclable materials for the lids. And the other is if the city can't provide full composting services, to potentially host on the website some simple home composting resources or literature that would allow citizens who are interested to undertake it themselves. So that was all, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you for those suggestions.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Seeing no other members of the public, we're back to council. If anyone would like to follow up with the question, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I know that the Monroe County Solid Waste District did do a solid waste audit, but Mr. Wason, can you speak to whether the city has done one?
We had, as part of our Kessler consulting report, I believe they utilized more of the, well, no, because the county's report came afterwards. I think we didn't do a full audit of the waste stream. I think they did some basic reconnaissance on that. Something we could be interested in. I do know that the county's report did include the city's waste stream. I'm almost, well, I hate to say I'm 100% certain of that, but you know, the things that we gleaned off of that was we knew 40% of our waste stream, our solid waste stream was compostable. We knew some rates of recyclable materials in there. We learned from the county's report, you know, all about the MRF and what the requirements for collection would be to make that economically viable. But you know, as far as a full waste audit, something we could look into and maybe fund into the future.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions before we move into final comment? All right, any last word? Councilmember Boland.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be name checked in this report. Mr. Wason knows full well how much I have been waiting for this data to find out how has the new cart program been not used by people who were always very cautious about putting out very little trash and recycling as much as they could. Those people deserve to get a break on their bill if they don't put their carts out. And that's been the case since day one. But okay, we've needed to gather the data. By second quarter of next year, I'm planning to put legislation on the table for such a thing. I hope that the data will be ready by then, because this is a very important thing to get more people to take part and to increase and improve our numbers, lower our carbon footprint. I'm also going to be interested in hearing sometime soon about the impact of the new, the soon-to-be new second company providing transfer station in town. Rumpke apparently is coming to town with their landfill closer to Bloomington than Hoosier Disposal. It may be able to reduce our carbon footprint if we can negotiate a deal with them. Certainly there'll be more competition and lower prices for sanitation in town. Overall, I know that it's been crazy times for sanitation and public works, of course, in general. Nevertheless, the data could not come a moment too soon. And I am very eager to see it. And I expect that Mr. Wason is going to send it to me as soon as he has some. But I hope that that's before the end of first quarter next year. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to thank the member of the public, Joseph Wynea, for his suggestion about the QR code. I think that's a great idea on the bins. I do currently serve on the Monroe County Solid Waste Management District Board after many, many years of service by my colleague, Councilmember Volin. And if you really are interested in waste management, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee, and we would love for you to get involved. The website is gogreendistrict.com. A little public service announcement there. I really, really commend the sanitation crews. I mean, here we are in the midst of a global pandemic of a life-threatening disease, and they are out still messing with people's garbage. So it's commendable. I'm sure they have many safety measures, but still, it's not something you want to be doing when there's communicable diseases around. So thank you very much to those crews, and thank you, Mr. Wason, for your presentation. I am also eager to get the data on the new sanitation system and see if we can't come up with a way to develop a pay-as-you-throw program because there are people who really and commendably so, dispose of very, very little. And so if we can reward them by not having them pay the minimum bin fee, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from council? Councilmember Smith.
Mr. Wason, I really wanted to trash your budget tonight. He shoots, he scores. But the department sanitation does a fantastic job. So thank you very much. I just had to say that to get that joke in there.
Who's next? Rim shot. All right, seeing no more comments, let us take our vote. Madam Clerk.
Okay, Councilmember Rallo. All right, we'll skip him. Scambalori?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Sims?
Yes.
Volin?
Okay, yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
And did we lose Councilmember Rallo?
Is he no longer on the board?
He is no longer on the board that I can see.
Seems like it.
Can we rack that one up again to technical difficulty? Give him a couple of minutes, see if he's reconnecting.
It's like he's out of the room, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it 8-0. And that wraps up the penultimate presentation for Mr. Wason, which brings us to traffic control and streets.
All right. One moment here. It's the seventh time I've done this evening. I should have it down by now. All right.
You're doing pretty well.
Screen is shared. Okay, here we are. We are rounding the final corner before the finish line. This will be the 2021 budget request for the street division. Street and Traffic Division of Public Works provides a wide array of city services in managing and maintaining public rights of way. As I mentioned previously, we're seeing some pretty big hits to our revenues in the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund. I want to clearly state my thanks to the administration and the controller for assisting and finding ways to offset these revenue reductions with the potential roughly $1 million interdepartmental transfer from the Public Works Administration budget request that we spoke about earlier. And I guess this is just when I just say, thank you, Mr. Underwood. Thank you, Mr. Underwood. As you can see, the responsibilities vary greatly based on the season and the weather. Our Recover Forward initiatives will make important investments in mobility improvements for pedestrians, and we're thankful to receive these funds for the important work. So far in 2020, 6,935 potholes have been filled, and we've done that at a 95% efficiency rate of doing so on the first day of being reported. So far, we've paved 6 street lane miles in-house this year, and with several more miles of contracted paving that has taken place in 2020. What is great about all of the asset management efforts that we take advantage of, our overall pavement condition index is updated after each paving season to represent our current ratings citywide. While it may not be some of the most glamorous work we do, our crack sealing program is scheduled for the fall once paving operations subside. Crack sealing furthers the lifespan of asphalt surfaces by several years when done according to best management practices. In the first part of the 2020 snow season, there were 3 snow and ice events that required almost 700 tons of de-icing material. Staff was able to also successfully test a new salt brine application on city streets, but it did not have to utilize it due to the lack of measurable snowfall over the winter months. This new pre-treatment service stands ready for deployment for the remainder of 2020 and into 2021. Although I am putting in all of the requests that we have another winter just like we did last year. And now on to leafing. If I'd known the amount of work I would have been creating for myself last budget season by talking so frankly about the leafing program, I'd do it all over again. It has allowed us to have significant and hopefully impactful conversations on how to modify operations to reduce fuel consumption while still operating a successful program. 2020's leafing season will see some minor modifications as well as a few pilot projects with specific neighborhoods. But again, this innovation project with the innovation cohort and the Bloomberg Philanthropy Institute was also severely impacted by COVID-19. We had just done our boot camp and our initial research outlines when COVID shut down the program. We're still moving forward on coming up with some proposed changes and some pilot projects, but we won't have any final recommendations for any type of major program overhauls this leafing season. We initiated and begun construction of the second phase of the Sidewalk Repair Assistance Program I've referred to previously. Construction began in late July along North Madison Street between 14th and 17th Street, and that will replace 1,100 linear feet of sidewalk and 700 linear feet of curb. We've also completed 1,554.6 linear feet of residential sidewalk replacement, as well as we've installed 29 new ADA ramps year to date. The Collaborative Alley Project, working with multiple departments to create safe and walkable pedestrian areas with the Alley Activation Project, is currently out to bid, as I've mentioned, and we're hopeful to get that project wrapped up before the end of construction season. 3 new traffic signals will be installed within city limits, one at 11th and Walnut, one at 14th and Walnut, and one at Deborah Drive and Tap near the new Hoosier Energy facility, which that light installation is being funded by NDOT through previous agreements. 3 existing traffic signals are also scheduled for replacement. Actually, we've moved one of those out, 17th and Dunn. Overall, the street division is also in the process of acquiring proposal from vendors for technology upgrades for several corridors of traffic signals, and we're hopeful to get this goal completed by the end of Q4. With our management of the urban forest in coordination with Parks and Recreation, we have responded to 40 different incidents of hazardous tree removal so far this year during weather events. 2020 also saw the implementation of a street sweeping interactive map that is operational on the city's street department website. Overall, 165.22 tons of debris was removed from city streets. And I would like to just point out some recent efforts at some of our community gateways to really work on some beautification efforts. Over the last several weeks, we spent many staff hours with a variety of assistance from Parks and Rec and City of Bloomington Utilities, as well as the Brighton B-Town crews, to remove weeds within the gutter lines and where the asphalt meets the concrete lines. So we went in and we'd scrape out all the weeds, and we would take the street sweeper through afterwards. The before and after pictures of Miller Showers Park and some of the areas on the bypass were just really nice to be able to brag about. So back to our 2017 data collection efforts on pavement and sidewalk condition index and all of that. There was also part of that project was a sign inventory to determine the number of signs that don't meet regulatory guidelines. So far, we've replaced 286 of those signs that have failed inspection through 2020 so far. Another area that doesn't receive a lot of attention but is really important is our in-house line locating program that identifies underground fiber, streetlight, and traffic signal infrastructure. And this is all part of the underground, the 811 type program. To date, in 2020, we've received 3,628 line location requests, and 725 of those requests required traffic signal equipment to be located by our staff. Continuing with some of our 2020 budget goal updates, with the LRS fund and streetlights, and we've taken a very conservative approach, not knowing where funding was going to end up with the local road and street fund that funds new streetlight installations. But we're happy to report that we believe we're going to be able to meet our goals in that area for 2020. Moving on to 2021, you're going to see that a lot of our goals are very similar to what we've done in 2020. That's purposeful. The responsibility areas remain the same. And while we try to improve and become more efficient every year, the responsibility areas of the street department really stay the same. Given some of the funding impacts with the MVH fund that we've talked about, we're hopeful to be able to continue to meet our goals for 2020 and 2021. But I'd be lying if I didn't say there was some uncertainty there. Snow removal. Oh yeah, we're just gonna skip this slide due to my confidence in the request for no snow in 2021. Actually, I'm kidding. We'll be fully prepared to respond to any and all snow events that may occur. As far as relief removal, and I spoke to some of this earlier in terms of the Bloomberg innovation cohort and everything. We're still moving that aspect of research and community surveys and community conversations on our leaf collection efforts. That's moving forward. We're just not there yet. As I said, COVID-19 really put a damper on that project. But I am hopeful that we'll be coming back over the next year with some significant updates and to that program. Again, we'll continue our sidewalk repair efforts community-wide, not only with the resources we have, but also of reminding property owners of their responsibility to maintain sidewalks adjacent to their property. 2021 plans are to replace and upgrade 9 different traffic signals. And we'll also continue to support Parks and Recreation and our overall efforts to manage the urban forest. We'll be looking to replace an additional 347 of the street signs that were not up to current standards. And we'll continue to our robust street sweeping efforts. Another area of focus is going to be on alley upgrades. I truly feel like the alleys are an unheralded and necessary part of the overall transportation network, and that they contain a substantial amount of underutilization when it comes to mobility options for all users of the transportation network. As we've talked about, continuing to look for investments we can make in LED efficiencies, whether at our traffic signals or with our street lighting network. And as for some budget highlight requests or budget request highlights, we've talked a lot about the funding and with the MVH, with the overall funding, we're hopeful to be able to fund through the MVH funding the upgrade of the field reconnaissance surveys. That's recommended for every 3 years. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to do that with the MVH funding. Overall, the local road and street funding request is pretty standard with just very modest increases anticipated due to energy consumption. And the CCD and CCI requests from Public Works are pretty standard without any major increases or requests. Overall, the street department's total budget request is 7.97 million, or a decrease of 4%. And this also, one key thing to point out here, and I know Controller Underwood mentioned this earlier. So if all of the budgetary hits with motor vehicle highway and how we're trying to adjust funding sources and such, our 2021 budget request for the street department does not include any major capital outlay purchases as we would hope. We're always trying to meet best management practices on vehicle replacement and things, but recognizing the shortfalls that we're going to experience going forward, we don't have specific budgetary requests for capital in the street department budget, but we'll hopefully look to the vehicle replacement fund and some other areas to help meet their needs. If I finished in any other way than stating that I'm proud of the efforts of the street division of Public Works, I'd be remiss. This is another division that works tirelessly on behalf of our residents and making sure that our roads, sidewalks, and entire transportation network is doing everything it can do to meet the varying needs of all of the users. My thanks goes out to Joe Van Devener and the leadership team he's assembled, and each and every employee that does all this great work. And I guess for the last time tonight, I will say that I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And that concludes the Adam Wason Show with a cast of really great people. Thank you so much.
Does that mean no questions?
No, we're going to get the questions, but your presentation is complete. Council questions. What do we want to know from Mr. Wason? Councilmember Scambalori.
Thank you. First of all, wow. Okay. Second of all, did I understand you correctly that 90% of potholes reported are patched within a day?
95% of reported potholes with accurate locations are filled within 1 business day. So we give ourselves a little grace over the weekends, and but yes, we do a pretty tremendous job when they're reported.
Wow, thank you. Can we talk more about the leaf collection program? Specifically, have you identified the 2 pilot neighborhoods yet? And if not, when will that be announced?
We are working diligently with Dave Takid and the innovation cohort to work through that over the next couple weeks. I wouldn't even begin to lie to you and say that we know what that's going to look like yet. It could be a lot of different things. What we do know is that we're looking at some of the neighborhoods on the east side that have significant tree canopy, possibly like Park Ridge or Spicewood that have specific tree varieties as well. And so we're not quite there yet to say exactly, but what I can tell you is, some of the things that we're going to look to do this year is, really put out stronger communication efforts to say exactly when we're going to be, where we're going to be, whether it's yard signs or, we do an interactive map every year, but we're going to try some things. And we'll be very communicative with those changes.
Okay. And you might want to have Ms. Kidd chime in on this too, but can you speak in really specific terms about how you're going to go about gathering feedback over this year, not just from those 2 neighborhoods, but I think all of us represent neighborhoods that have a tree canopy in one way.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we're really going to improve our our upfront communications, but we've, you know, I'm sure council saw, we've done surveys of the community recently. We've taken that feedback and reached out specifically to residents that were willing to have follow-up conversations with us. So absolutely, you know, it's going to involve communication. It's going to involve a lot of different aspects of getting information out in a timely and efficient way.
Okay. And just a friendly request on that too, while I still have time. If you could allow a little extra time, I think there was like a really quick turnaround time on one of the LEAF surveys. And I was able to share it with constituents, but it would be helpful to make sure we have lead time to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I had a question about just to understand how we work with traffic signals a little more. I gather just from previous conversations, mainly with Mr. Copper, that this isn't, we have some sort of outdated equipment that will take a long time to update, and that this isn't a simple remote fix to most things. And we've been speaking specifically about pedestrian recall that should be in effect at a signal at College and 11th, but isn't. And I'm just curious to get a better sense of the backlog of signal updates that we may have, at any given time. I imagine there's just sort of a rolling need to update some of those things based on projects and whatnot. So what does that look like? Is it systematized in any way?
That's what so that's exactly some of the investments we're looking to make, where when I talked about some of the corridor improvements to update technology to better to update the technologies to be consistent across the board throughout the city, to offer more remote ability in terms of remote repairs or remote timing changes. I know Joe Van Devender is still on the call. Joe, can you help me out here and talk a little bit more about what we're thinking about with the signal network throughout the community and how we can make improvements there?
Sure. This is Joe Van Devender, Director of Street Operations. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's part of what we're trying to purchase here in the fourth quarter, is to tie the College and Walnut corridors together. We have an aging radio system right now that allows clocks to drift. This would allow intersections to interact with each other.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so those are the exact types of investments we're looking to make on the corridors and then take it out further. I mean, ideally, council member, we would be well on our way to a smart cities approach to all of these things with the interconnectivity and the offsite management and such. And that's really where we want to head with it. So use technology to our advantage whenever we can.
Thanks. And do you have a sense of the current backlog of issues that need attending to in terms of how long it takes to resolve issues under our current equipment profile?
Joe?
Again, it would depend on what it is, whether we're waiting on a part or something like that. I'd have to know exactly which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, that's fair. You may. I'll follow up just briefly. Specifically, this College and 11th intersection. It's not in pedestrian recall, where it automatically goes to a pedestrian signal for the north-south crossing. And Mr. Copper said it should be, but it's in the queue to be updated, and it's been that way for a little bit. So I just wanted to ask about that type of I imagine there's a backlog of work or something. So I was just hoping to understand it a little better, is all.
Yeah, real quick, Joe, is that going to be the signal technology? Well, be careful here. Is that the technology on the pedestrian equipment that the company?
Yes, probably.
Yeah. So without, I don't know how much I.
We can follow up via email also.
Yep, perfect.
It sounds too technical. Yeah, that's good.
It is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to bring up the longstanding problem of snow plows going down our streets and removing snow and ice from the streets and putting it instead onto our sidewalks. Is there any equipment improvement or anything that can be done to keep that additional snow from blocking our sidewalks?
In a very blunt way, no, not really. You know, I think, you know, we could put a lot more resources to trying to move the snow to the middle of the road and then removing it via truck and such. But, you know, it's more of an issue for monolithic sidewalks that are right up against the road. If there's a tree plot, that it tends not to be as big of an issue. But, you know, in all honesty and with all due respect, you know, our main goal is to get the roadways clear for safe passage for, you know, for public safety, for vehicles, et cetera. And, you know, I think that's just part of, you know, some of the downfall of having to get the snow off the roads. Joe, I don't know if you'd want to add anything there or not.
No, I agree. I mean, there are times when you can angle the blade and try to take it all to the other side of the road if there's not a monolithic sidewalk over there. But other than that, it's the same problem.
Well, it just seems like I mean, I know that individual property owners are responsible for the sidewalks as part of their house, but I mean, I can go out at, you know, before work at 7 a.m. and go clear it, and then when I get home, it's all covered because the snowplow has been by again. So it's just very frustrating, and it seems to really preference clearing the way for motor vehicles versus for people. That's just a comment, I suppose.
Any other questions? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, following up with the same issue. I know some cities, it's pretty uncommon, but some cities do clear sidewalks of snow and ice as a city service like we do for streets. You know, imagining that might be cost prohibitive in Bloomington at this time, based on our, you know, willingness to spend on different things. Has it been considered at all to look at the particular problem areas, primarily monolithic sidewalks, perhaps on busier streets, that really wind up taking the brunt of this problem? I know I've seen folks, you know, struggling to walk down South Walnut because there's, you know, in the winter, which is just really, really dangerous. And some folks, you know, have no alternative options for a route. So just, could we mitigate the worst of this with, you know, and have we attempted to run some cost figures on what that might look like to mitigate the worst of this problem that Councilmember Piedmont-Smith brought up?
I can't say that we've run any numbers on what it would be like to remove snow from sidewalks across the city or anything like that. I think it would be, I think it would be cost prohibitive, you know, but I think we could, you know, on some of those higher pedestrian traffic corridor areas, look at some alternatives. You're right, northbound Walnut there, you know, northbound Walnut from, shoot, I can't think of a section of northbound Walnut other than maybe north of First Street that has any tree plots or plantings or things. So it is monolithic the whole way. You know, with those major corridors, you know, yes, we're trying to keep them as clear as possible throughout the snowfalls. You know, I think the majority of these issues arise when the snow events are either over the course of a full day or multiple days. You know, when folks get out, they get it cleaned, and then snow keeps coming and we're still doing everything we're required to do. So, you know, maybe on some of those higher traffic areas, yeah, certainly we could look at some options. But I'd be really hesitant to do any type of commitment right now to say that we would take on clearing of sidewalks. You know, we do have clearing responsibility for all the city's side paths. But, you know, it'd be interesting to learn more of like the specific areas. You know, I think Joe, can we pull from our sidewalk data? I think we can. We can pull every location of monolithic, can't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can at least identify all those areas. You You know, like Joe said, maybe it's a matter of pushing it to the other side of the street. There's some complicating factors, but we can at least explore the issue some more for sure.
No doubt, but yeah, worth maybe looking into a bit more on some of those questions. Thanks.
Questions? Any others? All right, seeing none, let us go back to the public and see if we have any comments, either in the chat room or with a raised hand.
Okay, it looks like we have a question from Mr. Alexander, who I will go ahead and unmute.
Of course, it's a comment, period.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Greg. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Greg Alexander again. Our growth policies plan had a green waste system plan attached to it in 2008 that specifically said in black and white, no ambiguity, Public Works is responsible for clearing snow and vegetation off of sidewalks, as well as maintaining them for pavement deterioration on the sidewalk. And that was 12 years ago. And the new transportation plan echoes that. It says it has a half-page picture just showing that pedestrians are a higher priority than cyclists, and buses are a higher priority than cars. I kind of wonder if you guys even read these things, if you got hoodwinked by planning staff or something and didn't know you were endorsing that we actually should consider pedestrians a priority above cars. But, this is just such a perennial problem. It's been a problem for 20 years. I've been walking in the street on major arterials, on College, on West 3rd Street, because of this sort of problem. And we're going to hear excuse. But if pedestrians are the higher priority, we can just simply pave or plow one lane of Walnut. Walnut is 2 lanes northbound on South Walnut. We'll just plow the inner lane and let the snow go into the outer lane and then not plow it onto the sidewalk. If pedestrians are actually a priority, we would be considering stuff like that. So are pedestrians actually a priority? That's what I'm asking you, because right now pedestrians are walking in the street and it is mostly poor people. It is mostly people without money, people who can afford a car, drive. I was talking to my neighbor when we had a snowfall. He said, he works a quarter mile from his house. He said he drove specifically because it was a snowfall, because they had plowed all the snow onto the sidewalks. And so he drove in the snowfall. That's not safe. That is less safe than him walking. But he couldn't walk because we didn't do crap for the sidewalks. Thanks for nothing.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
No, I don't see anybody else from the public with the raised hand, and I don't see anything in the chat. No? Okay.
All right. That being the case, let us return to council for a final comment on the final presentation with the traffic control on streets. Anyone want to have the final word here?
Sorry.
All right.
I'll go.
Let us.
Oh,
Councilmember Rosenberg.
I'll go. Yeah, sorry. I didn't have a question. I just had some comments. This is always a hard part for me with streets, because I, of course, think about the disparity between streets and sidewalks and bike infrastructure. And I mean, just like some of the notes I wrote down, one of the goals is to maintain and repair 237 lane miles of streets and then repair 6,000 linear feet of sidewalks. So that's a little over a mile of sidewalk.
The entire
237 miles.
237 pavement miles.
It's like lanes. It's lanes, right? It's like 3 lanes on Walnut makes up. Right. And I mean, I guess I'm just like, can you imagine if we switched that and we maintained all of our sidewalks? Or can you imagine if we switched it and homeowners had to maintain the street outside of their house instead of the sidewalk? It would be so different. But I mean, what Mr. Alexander said is right. Like, we are prioritizing drivers when our comp plan says we need to be prioritizing bicyclists and pedestrians. And I just think we're so far from that. I don't know what to do. I mean, it's not going to happen in a city budget. It's going to happen with TIF dollars. It's going to happen with bonding, but we have to talk about it. I mean, I know it's hard to maintain streets, right? And like, we're repairing potholes 95% of the time. Like, that's good for drivers, right? But like, bicyclists just like have a hard time biking on streets, right? And it's just like, I mean, even I love alleys, or they're some of my favorite little things, but even if we maintain 33 miles of sidewalks instead of 33 miles of alleys, that would be so different for folks getting around like the core area. So it's just hard for me. Like, I want to see a bigger priority, or I want to see even a movement toward a priority for bike and ped infrastructure here. And I don't know, I didn't see that tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Oh, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Councilmember Rosenbarger said, and I particularly liked her mention of TIF money because that, to my knowledge, has never been done in Bloomington, but I think it's a legitimate use of tax increment financing to repair sidewalks, to maybe make it so we have fewer monolithic sidewalks in the city. I think that would be an excellent investment of tax dollars, and I encourage the administration to look into that and get together a proposal for the Redevelopment Commission, because the need for better sidewalks is so widespread, and so many property owners do not have the means to make the repairs, and we don't even have a good enforcement mechanism to force them to make repairs, even if they do have the means. The problem is just so large, we need a new funding source. So I just wanted to throw my support behind the idea of using TIF money. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Boland.
I've been trying not to say very much, but I can't help myself. I want to not only echo what my colleagues have just said, I want to say why I'm going to vote no on the streets budget tonight, because this is the new sanitation. At least sanitation come up to standard that I for, and I'm delayed, but I believe the numbers that we're going to change next year. We need to change policy on streets. We need to stop thinking that we have to plow every lane mile. I keep looking at College and Walnut and I think, why do we have to plow every lane? We don't. We don't have to block sidewalks. We don't have to do it. We can identify some lane miles where the monolithic sidewalks dictate that we shouldn't plow snow over them, but we have to do it now. So I'm going to send a message tonight and say no to the streets budget until we come up with a better answer. It's not good enough anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing no more council comments, let us go to the vote here on our last item. Clerk Bolden.
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger?
No.
Sims?
Yes.
Volan?
No.
Piedmont Smith?
Abstain.
Flaherty?
Abstain.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
And Scambolery?
Yes.
All right, that is 4-2-2. And thank you all for hanging in there with us. Thank you, Mr. Wason.